Keep up to date everywhere. News Talk 820 WBAP.
In the WBAP newsroom.
We may have a verdict tomorrow. So I want us to be prepared and to have the real story. We'll be the smartest people in the office tomorrow. If and when the verdict comes down. If it doesn't come down tomorrow, it'll probably come down Thursday is what I'm hearing. And we have an attorney, and her name is Chrysta Castañeda. She is a lawyer, and I want to make sure I get this right, Crystal. You are, first of all, thank you for joining us here on the Chris Crock Show on WBAP. I appreciate that.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so you're an attorney and crisis communications advisor, and the website is highenergylitigation.com. And
yes.
you are in that trial. You've been in that trial most days, if not all?
I have been in the trial, yes, for the last several weeks, and of course waiting with all the rest of you for what the jury's going to say.
So there's a lot of speculation that it could be headed to a hung jury, they're saying. What are you seeing, and what are you thinking from what you've seen?
Well, today the jury told the judge that it was hung or deadlocked on at least one count. Mm-hmm. We don't know how many counts. We don't know whether it says to Commissioner Price or to Daphne Fain, and so we can't evaluate how far apart they are, but we do know that they're unable to reach a unanimous verdict as they have to on all the counts. Now,
if they have unanimity on something or some things, apparently, right? So I'm guessing since there's nothing horribly over the top weak, that must mean there's got to be a few convictions, maybe. Do you have any sense on that?
Well, I don't know that we can conclude that there are some convictions. We could conclude that they've decided to acquit on all but, a couple of counts and that they're deadlocked on those couple of counts. I don't think we can presume one way or the other just because, we don't know what they've deadlocked on and we don't know how they're viewing the case, generally speaking.
Are you thinking that tomorrow we'll probably get a verdict, or Thursday morning at the latest? Are you thinking right now from what you've seen?
I would love for us all to be taken out of our suspense, and I'm sure that the prosecution and the defendants would love that too, but I think we're still, it's too speculative to say. The judge is maybe going to send them back a second and a third time if they keep reporting that they're deadlocked, so it's too early to really predict.
If they don't reach a verdict on all 11 counts, let's say they have a couple guilties. By the way, the jury had a defeated look on their faces, people were saying today. What is that? I mean, what are you seeing in their faces?
I didn't personally observe the jurors, but I know many people have been reporting that they were looking stressed and defeated. And it is a stressful occupation to be a juror, even if you're doing it on a temporary basis. These people have been involved in this trial for more than 2 months. They have an obligation to try to reach a consensus. Clearly, they're not reaching a consensus on everything. And that's a stressful situation when you're, spending all day trying to convince other people to see things, in a unanimous way. So I'm sure that's what the stress is. They'd like to have it done.
If they have a couple guilties and the rest are, they don't know, what do you think will happen at that point?
Well, it's possible for them to return guilty or acquittal, for that matter, on a few counts and have some where they just simply can't agree, and that's called a hung jury as to those particular counts. After that point, receiving the jury verdict is just step one. Then the judge has to decide whether to enter judgment of guilt or innocence in accordance with the jury's verdict. And she's made some indications that as to the mail fraud counts, she doesn't think the government can legally prevail on the theory that they have presented.
Right. So if they're going to get convicted on anything, it better not be mail fraud, because that'll be thrown out, is what we all understand, right?
The judge has certainly made those comments. When she gets the verdict back, it's possible for her to decide otherwise. And she did receive additional briefing on that subject, meaning that the government gave her what they thought the law was and what their arguments were in written form.
What did you think of that? Because it's all about, the judge, as we know earlier said, Judge Lynn said, I think last week or something, the mail fraud counts are probably going to get thrown out. I don't think you proved your case at all. And today I understand and that the prosecution said, briefed the judge, as you mentioned, saying something to the effect of, well, yes, it was under contract here, but Kathy Neely did mail some payments. How did that come across to you, and how did the judge react to that?
So the theory by the prosecution is that Kathy Neely mailed payments for the benefit of John Wiley Price, and these were her car payments. So she apparently financed a car, let him use it, and made the payments as required by the note. And the judge's concern was, well, didn't she have to mail the payments to the car company? And is that enough as a matter of law to prove a conspiracy? That's what the prosecution submitted additional legal authority on, and they contend that that is enough.
How did that strike you?
Well, it strikes me that it's a legal question that has some ambiguity in it, and the judge is going to have to decide whether, after all the evidence is in, and even if you think that those payments were made and they were made to benefit Price, if that's enough as a matter of law.
Does it seem to you that the judge may have been swayed more, or do you think she's still probably in the same position with that mail fraud stuff?
You know, I would love to be able to predict judges' minds, but after 25 years in this business, they still surprise me.
Is it, if you had to say from what you've been seeing in this trial, and we're joined by Chrysta Castañeda, and she is a legal expert, she's an attorney and a crisis communications advisor. Her website is highenergylitigation.com. If you were to, what is your gut telling you right now, honestly, that, is it looking, if you had to decide with what side you think it's going right now, what are you thinking?
Well, we know that the defense looked pretty happy walking out of the courtroom today, and there's actually some research on jury verdicts that backs this up, which is that the longer it takes for a jury to deliberate, that tends to favor the defendant. So, it's impossible to predict the final outcome here, but it may be that the jury is swayed by some of the defense arguments, and it could be a mixed verdict. It could be that he's acquitted of some and not acquitted of others, and Daphne Fain the same way.
Yeah, what do you think about Daphne Fain? I mean, why do you think she did not turn state's evidence? And I don't see how she's going to get off with at least lying to the FBI.
Well, let's take that count, because I actually heard the officer, the FBI agent, testify about that particular issue. So he says, and he took notes from an interview that he did with Miss Fain, and what he says is that she lied about whether her company, which is called MMS, conveyed any benefit on John Wiley Price, and that she also lied as to whether Price gave money to MMS. And the interesting thing is that his own notes corroborate, and they were some of the documents that were produced later in the case.
Where they messed up and didn't provide everything, right?
Exactly. And his own notes seem to say that she said that John Wiley Price did put money into the MMS bank account. Again, it's his own handwritten notes, but even just reading the words on the page, the defense cross-examined him and seemed to raise some questions as to whether she had even said what they say she said.
Kathy Neely, and I'm not sure being negative or mean here, but she, of course, is having a separate trial. I've kind of compared her to Emperor Palpatine, like in Star Wars, where she's kind of the one really pulling the strings, if you will, and kind of running the whole show. What are your thoughts about that as far as the characters in this and how it all kind of is unraveling out in this?
Well, I will tell you, in this trial, we haven't heard as much evidence about Kathy Neely, and I'm going to have to beg off on Emperor Palpatine, because I knew the first Star Wars better than I knew the later Star Wars. But anyway, we haven't heard as much about her or her motives or why she took some of the actions that she took. And, of course, we haven't heard her defense because she didn't testify in this trial. Right. So what we did hear a lot about is there were transactions, monetary transactions, going back and forth between Kathy Neely and Commissioner Price, and that there's the government's alleging and introduced some evidence that maybe Commissioner Price was giving her clients who had business before the Commissioner's Court a leg up in some of the proceedings. Now, the hard thing, the way that the the jury is asked to answer these questions is they were given very specific dates that the government has to prove that certain things happen. Mm-hmm. And whether the jury has found that specific evidence in the 8 weeks of trial, I can't comment on that.
Chrysta Castañeda is an attorney and has been in that trial for several weeks, as she said, and a crisis communications advisor. The website is highenergylitigation.com. Chrysta, thank you for coming on tonight and telling us what you know from your expertise. I appreciate it. We'll check in with you again if we get some kind of a verdict soon.
Happy to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. There she goes. Interesting stuff, huh? Very interesting stuff.